Before Tesla, before Warby Parker, before the direct-to-consumer revolution swept through retail, there was Lululemon. I read this autobiography of the founder of Lululemon called Black Stretchy Pants, and the founder, Chip Wilson, offers some fascinating insights into the very early days of the vertically integrated brand model that he helped to popularize and develop in the late 90s. And ultimately, the challenge of maintaining that vision at a global scale. Now, there's a lot to unpack in this story, which is a very fun read. I would describe Chip Wilson as a typical visionary entrepreneur, high energy, brash, high conviction, and those traits were certainly key to his success in building a wildly successful brand. But it also led to his very dramatic ousting at Lululemon after it went public. In this book review, I'm going to focus on just a few of the takeaways that the Lululemon story has for people in e-commerce and retail media. One is how Lululemon pioneered the later D2C movement. The second is product development around a muse and what this means for people in e-commerce roles within larger companies. And then finally, the fall of Chip Wilson and his ousting from Lululemon and how short-term financial objectives really compromise, in his view, the making of a great brand. Welcome to the Retail Media Breakfast Club, where there is always a latte to learn. I'm your host, Kiri Masters, and every weekday at 6 a.m. Eastern, I bring you candid and real discussions in the world of retail media and marketplaces in just 10 minutes. But today it's Friday, and Fridays are a special edition of the show where I share my notes from a book that I've read that's relevant to retail. It might be the origin story of a retailer or a textbook on a business concept. Look, we don't always have time for reading as much as we want, but when you're a part of the Retail Media Breakfast Club, we get to copy each other's homework. So let's jump in to this week's book. So let's start with this early vertical integration idea. Chip Wilson didn't immediately land on vertical integration. He started a number of businesses before Lululemon, starting with importing Speedos to Canada, where they were not yet popular, and then designing styles of women's shorts and then men's board shorts in the surfing era. But it was his experience with a snowboarding brand that he co-founded called West Beach that really proved transformative. So at West Beach, he witnessed how the wholesale distribution model squeezed margins and disconnected brands from their customers. The math was simple but compelling. Through wholesale channels, a $40 product had to be marked up to $160 to be sold in a retail store. But with vertical integration, the same product could be manufactured for $30 and sold directly to customers for $90. And so Chip Wilson became absolutely convinced that this vertical model was the only way forward. But unlike how later D2C brands cast retailers as villainous intermediaries, Lululemon's vertical integration was driven by a deeper purpose, which was controlling the customer experience and gathering feedback from customers in order to fuel innovation. Now, the challenge was that this model required significant scale to work. Chip Wilson knew that he needed to produce between 500 to 2,000 units of a style at a time to achieve the necessary production costs. And so this feedback that they were getting came from the stores. The stores were sort of an innovation lab for Lululemon, where the store associates were highly trained in the product and they would be very collaborative in selling with customers, providing feedback back into the design process and ensure that the products were meeting the needs of customers in stores, that they were actually tracking trends and getting feedback from customers and building that right back into the product innovation cycle. So related to this was product development that was built around a very specific muse. So central to Lululemon's success was Wilson's laser focus on an archetype customer that he called the Supergirl. And the Supergirl was a 32-year-old professional woman who was athletic, educated, and style conscious. And so this went beyond like your typical demographic targeting. Wilson built the whole company around this muse, not just as a customer avatar, but around how the stores would be designed and where they would be located and the culture of the company and how careers were defined at Lululemon. He recalls how store employees would spend time working on the floor to observe customer reactions. He says, "We all learned what our guests thought of the clothing just by their facial expressions, body language, and comments when they were trying things on." And this granular customer insight proved super valuable for product development. Chip Wilson didn't just identify demographic, he developed an entire world about this emerging psychographic. And I think for today's e-commerce professionals, this is one area that e-commerce people feel that they could be adding more value in general in the product development lifecycle. You think about what an e-commerce team sees in terms of the product reviews coming through and the feedback coming through, looking at competitors' product reviews, looking at search term reports and what people are buying instead of your product or after your product or in combination in baskets. I can just imagine what Chip Wilson would have done with that information in a digital sense. This is the digital version of that fitting room conversation that store associates at Lululemon were having early on and feeding back into the product lifecycle. And finally, the fall. Brand vision versus Wall Street. The second half of the book, in my view, is a little bit of a tirade against the investors and executives who Chip Wilson felt kind of wronged him. And it is very interesting and illuminating about the pitfalls of capitalism and private equity and the way that things are set up, quarterly earnings really driving a lot of decisions that are made. Now, Chip Wilson didn't do himself a whole lot of favors. He was a little bit of a troublemaker to the board in their view. He felt so strongly and passionately about the brand and what the brand represented. In his view, the brand went far, far beyond a apparel brand, and it was almost like a expression of his values and what he wanted to see in the world. So naturally, that just didn't translate super well to a public company, and the focus had to shift over time from a brand built on ideals to quarterly profits. Quality control budgets were cut, product innovation didn't follow the same cadence, prices were raised just because they could be, because it was a premium brand. And the numbers told the story. From over a 5-year period from 2013 to 2018, while competitors grew at 17%, Lululemon stock only grew at 1.5%. And so Chip Wilson became more of an activist investor. He had a lot of his net worth tied up in his company, and he became very vocal in his criticism of the company's decisions and started to be pushed out. It was interesting to read how all of this unfolded, and it is a cautionary tale of what can happen to a company when the focus is taken off the brand and the customer experience and what you're out there saying in the market versus the experience that customers are actually having with the product. When that's out of alignment, the equity of the brand is ultimately eroded. So some lessons for today's retail leaders. I think the value of understanding first-party customer data and how customers are interacting with the product is really interesting, whether that comes through physical stores and observing customers, trying on, speaking with them, or through digital signals that we have today, and we have a lot more of them today. The ability to observe and understand customer behavior remains essential. I think another super relevant takeaway for me was Wilson's warning about maintaining quality and brand value amid the pressure for short-term profits. So we are in a challenging economic environment right now, And that can lead brands to try and squeeze some more margin from their suppliers, and just how that can ultimately backfire for a premium brand, especially. Really balancing this, need for short-term revenue growth with long-term brand building that is prevalent in today's quarterly driven markets. So it was a good read. Do recommend checking out the book if you want to dig deeper into the Lululemon story, get a little bit of those saucy details about how everything unfolded with Chip Wilson's exit from Lululemon. It's called Little Black Stretchy Pants, and I'll link to it in the show notes. Well, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Retail Media Breakfast Club. We meet here every day at 6 a.m. Eastern. So be sure to subscribe and get your daily dose of insights, trends, and hot takes in the world of retail media and marketplaces.